Speaking of picking dust at the right time, I enjoy this energy formula called Game of Subs. Just chuck one scoop of this powder or dust, whatever you want to call it, 100 servings fit in a tub this size, shake it up, and Bob's your uncle. Look, could fit anywhere, right? In your pocket, could go in a bag, could go up on your shelf, or just right there, yeah, just right there, look. Nothing, don't even know why I mentioned that. I mean, I don't even know why I mentioned that. Nothing awkward, you know. I tell you what's not awkward, though. Getting 10% off your order with the code Thorin, Thorin, at GameSubs.gg. Now, a core principle I've developed as part of my analytical persona, if you've ever watched me on CSGO desks, you'll know this, is I've always thought a lot of pro teams treated dust2 as it was just any other map, and so their win rate on that map was equivalent to the win rate on Nuke, on Crash, or Mirage, or whatever, and they didn't basically give the map its respect as a unique map in the map pool and how it is played and what the win conditions are. So for me, I've always talked about dust2 picks often being a gamble, and actually sometimes thinking that even though it might be on paper a team's best team, it was a mistake to pick the map. Now, I did develop this premise or principle during the dust2 original dust2 days, as in the version of the map that you might remember from the first, I think it was 2016 maybe that it got reworked, something like that period of time. The map I'm talking about is that one. Actually, I think it was maybe 2018 I think it was 2018 that the rework came. I think maybe they took it out around 2016. So that map was much more, it was one of the most loose maps that was just about fragging and brawling, basically. If you had the best player in the world, it's one of the maps you wanted to go into. Hence, players like Nico in 2016, Shox in 2016, those players early in their career, in the case of Shox, like Olaf Meister. If you have some of these players, you can dominate this map because the individual player was king on that map. The way they could control the game, most of those players would go mid and call around themselves. They were just so difficult to deal with as the CTs that are spread out, that are waiting for the attacks. Obviously, there's long rotation points. So for me, the new version of dust2 is not quite like that. It's still a fragging map, but it's also been somewhat balanced out by strategic concepts, the tempo you play at, how much utility usage you have, tactical concepts like how to hit a site at the right timing and draw the other people away elsewhere from rotations at mid. I think it has become a little bit more tactical as a map, but I think even though, yes, now it's got some more team play and some more tactical elements, like, for example, how you retake as CTs on A is a lot more about counter utility, about boosting each other correctly. I think how you hold long is difficult because if you have too many people there, you will lock it down. But then again, it's got the longest rotation time in the game almost to go to the other site. So you're going to face a really tough time getting over in that regard. And you can easily get caught out of position, not even have a chance really to have a proper retake on the B site. So you're always trying to play an information game. But if we go to the core of why dust2 to this day remains a gamble, you've seen teams like G2, Vitality, others be amazing on the map, but then have it betray them in series. So the reason why it's a gamble to pick dust2 goes like this. The typical thinking for an analyst goes, whatever map you have a lot of volume in, so we know that you're reliable on it, and has one of your highest win rates, should be considered for a contender for your pick in a series. Now, the typical thinking for pros is a little bit different. They tend to go on recent scrim results, who are they beating on it, reliability in tournaments, is it stuck in their mind that's always saved us dust2, or their own personal feel and comfort on the map. Like, it doesn't matter what the win rate is. If they feel like we have a really good sense for the map or what to do at all times, that's how they're going to pick the map. The problem is, old dust2 was a very easy map to feel comfortable on if you had those star players, because basically they could just pull you out of the fire. So you'd think, oh, this is great. If they frag out, we just win the game. Also, it can, in theory, neutralise some of the strategical and tactical element from the opponent. So if you're playing an Astralis, a very, very skilled team, they're not going to dominate you as hard on that map as they are on a map like Nuke, like Train, Inferno, whatever their best maps were in whatever particular time we're talking about Astralis now. The trouble is this. Dust2 has almost never been a map that you can hit the really crazy win rates on. I'm talking about the kind of win rates you get on maps like Nuke, Train, Overpass, most famously, in the back in the day, maybe Cobblestone at some point in time, where you could actually have an 80 to 85 to 90% win rate on these maps if you are the absolute best in the world, and therefore feel very confident in picking it in a series, in some cases against anyone. Like the edge of 5% on something like Train can be enough to reliably win you the map. The issue is this. If you go as a great Dust 2 team into that map, you'll find that even the great teams, the best teams in the world, will go through many periods of time where once they've hit 10 or more games on Dust 2, they're only at a 70, a 75%, maybe an 80% win rate. It's very rare, even throwing in a bunch of tier 2 and tier 3 opponents, that you're going to get to the high win rates on this map. And so, as a result, playing Dust 2 and particularly picking Dust 2 just gives you way more potential to be upset by the other team, because they can outfrag you. They can use simple concepts to get T rounds. They can brute force the game to some degree. The same thing you might have gained an edge over the tactical team with if you're a really good team on it. You've got to apply similar thinking of what do I not want them to be able to do to me? What's going to make me feel uncomfortable? So if you're really good, not just on Dust 2, but also on maps like Inferno, Nuke, Overpass, Train, these maps in the map pool, then it makes a lot more sense in some cases to push the series there as your pick if the opponent is competent on Dust 2, but equally as bad or worse than you on those other maps. You're just going to be able to force your edge a lot more, and there's way less room to get upset. It's much more reliable. You can push your advantages more on maps like Nuke, like Overpass, like Train. The likelihood of someone fragging out individually on those maps and taking over the whole game, especially one individual, is just way lower. There's just much less chance of it happening. That's why for me, even when EG, Evil Geniuses, post-major last year, were god tier on the map, I actually thought they had stuck with picking it too long, and that was part of the reason that they went from being amazing to hitting a massive slump, because already they were in position to get upset on that map. And so then when their form dropped off, now they were getting upset even more, and suddenly they were losing whole series. They could get 2-0'd all the time by way, way lesser opponents. So to me, I think the problem was when they were truly god tier, they were at like an 80, maybe 8 higher percentage win rate on that map. They thought they'd solved Dust 2. Now, that is classic hubris that had bitten almost every great Dust 2 team in the arse at some point, because they don't take in mind the principles I'm outlining here. Another concept is, if you pick Dust 2, then you actually give your opponent a chance to win on your pick unless they're terrible. Now, if they pick a strong map for them, which is likely what they're going to do, and theirs isn't going to be Dust 2, then sometimes it isn't going to be as good for you on their map. That's going to be more safe and reliable, a home map for them. But they're at least going to have a crack on yours as long as they're competent on Dust 2 and as long as they have some fraggers. So if your pick is Dust 2, you basically give them a chance to 2-0 you when you have a bad day on Dust 2 and you don't get a safe map in the series. And part of being a truly great team is, listen, a truly great team 2-0s people. But on the tournaments where they're not doing that and they're not in their best form and things aren't going well, they have to be able to get to that third map in the series at a minimum to be able to still win, to give players a chance to wake up, to give the other team a chance to think about the pressure of playing this top team. So they need a reliable, safe home map that they can grind out a win on. Dust 2 is very rarely going to be that. So in my opinion though, the issue is, people have gotten my original premise. Like, I've heard it said that you have to say an idea a million times or something till it fully gets through to people. Because the idea is you say it first, people take it on board consciously and they go, interesting idea. Maybe there's something to that. The next few times they hear it and go, I am starting to see a pattern of that. Then you keep saying it, they start to see it in matches, you keep referencing instances, yeah. And eventually they just think it was their idea and go, I always thought the Dust 2 was good. And eventually it just becomes common received knowledge. So basically that part of the process has worked after all those years on the desk. People get now that it's a gamble. But now people have gone too far the other way and they're saying you should never pick it, or some of the best teams in the world shouldn't pick Dust 2. There are times to pick Dust 2. You can probably infer some of them by what I've outlined in when not to pick Dust 2. So taking my principle to the other extreme and say you should never pick it is wrong. Like, here's when you can pick Dust 2. Listen up, teams that are very good on Dust 2. When you are extremely good on Dust 2, you can already consider it seriously then, but only consider it. So if you are big in the summer, EG around that major last year, Team Liquid in the summer of 2019, Envious back in 2015, you can potentially pick it. Like, you in theory should be thinking about it as a strong contender. That is a map that you could probably get a lot of wins on. You might be the best team in the world on Dust 2, depending on what time period it is. And what if your map pool isn't super wide? Maybe it's being pinched elsewhere, or the second veto is going to be tricky. And so you think to yourself, it's still a better edge on Dust 2 than my edge on these other maps where maybe it's a shared map pool in the middle. And maybe I'm like a 5% higher chance of winning on Inferno, but I'm a 10 or 15% on Dust 2. Hard, but it can happen in certain series. How about when the other team is just really bad on Dust 2. They just don't enjoy it. They haven't got a good win rate and they don't seem to understand the premises, like how to hold long control, how to retake A, how to gamble off the guy who's in B, when to play for information in the B tunnels. If they don't get these principles, then in this scenario, if you're above average, you don't have to be really good on Dust 2. If you're above average and it's, say, their second, third, or God forbid, their worst map, just go for it. Like, your edge is still going to be really big. You can psychologically demoralize them if you beat them on it, because they're going to think, I don't know how to play this fucking map. Like, think of how Forza played at Flashpoint 2 in the group stage when they played against Envy and Big and practically just gave up Dust 2 because they were getting smashed so hard when they were on the CT side and they just didn't have any answers for it. They didn't have a feel for the meta. And in fact, losing on CT side of Dust 2 is what ended up putting them out of the tournament instead of going to the playoffs, when I thought they were actually a better team than Dignitas. Now, another time you can pick it is when the opponent is a low-skilled team. Because in that scenario, when you then force the game to be about brawling, fighting, push the tempo at times, you can just push your edge, which is having more skilled players. That's why I thought that in 2019, teams were doing the right thing when they would hard force Dust 2, even when they were not necessarily the best at themselves, against Ents, Renegades. These were the teams that were teams way better than their skill level. So you put them on Dust 2 and you force it to be a brawl and they're going to have a hard time. Now they need their 2.5 stars to really go off in the game, or you're going to be in a lot of matches against an otherwise very good set of teams on the more tactical maps, the Nukes and the Train of this world. Also, how about when the other team's map pick is one that you are good on, so then when you pick Dust 2, yes, they get a chance on your map, but you have a chance on theirs as well. So you've hedged against losing the Dust 2, and you get the upside of it. That's actually an aspect where, even if they're not amazing on Dust 2, but you are really good on their pick, it's also going to be totally fine to do it. Just go ahead and do it. It's why it actually initially made sense that EGU start going to Dust 2 so often. Because first of all, if they played Astralis and a number of other teams, Nape, those teams were going to pick Inferno against them, one of their other favourite maps. So their Dust 2 gamble factor isn't as big a deal because their other map that they're going to play is one that they would pick if not for Dust 2. So essentially they're just getting the series they want, and therefore, when they were on fire, they would 2-0 these teams. In the same way as you can get 2-0, they would use Dust 2 to 2-0 the other team. Made perfect sense for them to pick it. The point is, though, Dust 2 is unlike any other map. Now, certainly, if you want to just make a broad category of fragging maps or looser maps or maps so people know the meta roughly, yes, Mirage became a little bit more of a poggy map. Cash isn't in the map pool, but Cash had some of those elements to it. But Dust 2, in this sense of how it works in terms of win rates, your opponent, and meta strategizing for the series, it needs to be treated with its own respect and have its own conditions as to when you pick it. And there are certain times you should pick it, there are certain times you shouldn't pick it, and other times you got to know what the gamble is and know what you are stepping and opting into when you pick Dust 2. This video was kindly supported by Lager15, Pronogo, Mohammed Alabdul Razzaq, Dean Tanglis, Animosity, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Jensen Goh, Zoomba, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask me a question in one of those monthly AMAs I do? Would you like teasers for who's going to appear next on my content? Or would you even like to take part in one of those crazy donator discussions I do where we go all over the place? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skruilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.